maybe you get one or two other people. I don't know. Maybe, let's call it 125. You will then have approximately 320 people voting against it. Now, your sense is that this is the most prominent issue amongst people, I guess presumably because we're in a pandemic. I don't know that it's any less pressing because we're in a pandemic. I think if we have Medicare for all, it certainly would have made things a little bit easier, but I don't know that it would have had a material difference. But we just tested the premise of whether and I have no doubt, I've seen all the polling, the people support Medicare for all. How strong that support is. If in the nature, let's say the vote happened this week, they lose 325 to 125. Your argument is that this is going to make people rise up because of that, and I just don't see any evidence of it. We know that Bernie represented Medicare for all in the Democratic primary. That was not sufficient for him to beat Joe Biden. We know that 3 years ago, there was a vote that was shut down in the Senate. I don't know if people remember that, but that, I think, so I'm not convinced that step number 2, frankly, does bring about what you suggest it does.
So let me,
because you laid out a bunch of things, I want to address them. And so I'm not convinced that of that step number 2. I mean, it's an argument. Like I say, I don't think I ever came out and directly, attacked forced to vote, frankly. I mean, I think I commented on it subsequent to the attack that Jimmy had on AOC. I appreciate, Sorota's article and what you added to it. If you go to forcethevote.org, none of that's on there. And that has been the thrust of the strategy. I agree that there were other things that they could have leveraged. I don't agree on the pay-go being so narrow. In fact, I think there's a tremendous amount of stuff. In fact, everything that is being talked about in the news, the $1.9 trillion, everything from the HEROES Act, which is over $3 trillion bill, could go through that what you call narrow,
Right, it's narrowed down because it only applies to things that are related to COVID and the Green New Deal.
Everything right now is arguably a function of the pandemic.
You're talking about a COVID bill being enabled by the pay-go exemption, which is true because the pay-go exemption was for...
Not just the COVID bill, everything...
Sam, it's for COVID-related things, and it's for the Green New Deal.
But Joe Biden... But wait a second, let me just finish this, Bree.
I just want to correct
there were things that you said that I disagreed with. I waited till you were done, and then I corrected them. In fact, what I'm talking about is a correction. I think Joe Biden is proposing what I consider to be, and it comes from the HEROES Act, a horrible idea for health care. Subsidizing COBRA, okay, which I think everybody agrees is incredibly wasteful. It's just basically a sop to the insurance companies. It was in the HEROES Act as well. And that will be covered by the pay-go exemption. Everything right now can be justified because we are dealing with the greatest economic crisis that we've had in terms of job loss since they took records in 1967, that there is nothing you're hearing about what Joe Biden or Pelosi or anybody is presenting right now is being subjected to pay-go. If it was Medicare for all, if there was a chance, we know that it would lose in the House 325 to 125. It probably would never get a vote in the Senate. If it did, it would lose. I don't know what the numbers would be. It would probably be 55 to 45 best, maybe 70 to 30. But the fact of the matter is that pay-go would, getting rid of pay-go would allow for Medicare for all, but we know it's not going to pass.
Right. That's why one of the objectives was to get rid of pay-go. So one of the things I was arguing that the squad should hold out for and withhold a vote for is a complete eradication of pay-go, a Nancy Pelosi policy that they could have said, I'm not going to vote for you, Nancy Pelosi, until you get rid of pay-go. Instead of what they got, which instead was a pay-go exemption for things related to COVID relief.
Everything now. free.
You can't pass Medicare for all using.
Why could you pass the COBRA subsidies and not Medicare for all?
Because it's COVID contingent, and doing a program that's a permanent, economy-shifting, forever program like Medicare for All is not something that, and this is not me saying this, Sam, this is David Dayen immediately weighed in saying, I don't see why people like, my former boss at The Intercept are trying to pretend like this is something that's bigger than it's not. It is what it is, it allows what it allows, and it's a game. But even if we take the floor vote for Medicare for All completely out of the equation, the fact still remains that this was an opportunity of enormous leverage in which someone could have gotten a lot more than simply what they got. And it's not about characterizing what they did get as big or little or insignificant. Of course it's important. That's not the issue. The issue is this the best way for them to have maximized the real power that the left had to actually either oust Nancy Pelosi or in lieu of that, demand significant concessions for the left?
I mean, I think it's, if they end up spending $2 trillion, if they end up spending, we both agree, right? I mean, can we all agree here that there is no scenario when you talk about force the vote that Medicare for all can possibly happen within the next 2 years?
Well, if I can address that point, I was taking notes as well during that last. So that was one of the points that you brought up earlier in your last remarks, which was that you don't know that Medicare for all is a priority for folks, or that passing it during this pandemic would make a material difference.
No. I didn't say that. I said I don't think A, it's possible for it to pass now, and B, I'm not convinced the loss of it is going to create any type of mass uprising.
Okay, but you definitely said material difference. I mean, that's just a note that I took down.
In terms of the pandemic? No, yes. I'm saying Medicare for all is absolutely necessary as far as I'm concerned, just broadly speaking. But I don't know that something specific to COVID, short of the fact that I think people are losing their health insurance because of employment. I mean,
right, but short of that fact, that's a pretty big fact, Sam. 15 million uninsured Americans is a huge deal. And the only reason I believe it's not really being felt that way in terms of media coverage is because the media isn't covering it as such. And so my point with force the vote is not, of course, Sam. Nobody here thinks that next week, 2 weeks, a month, even a year after a force the vote effort, that we're going to have Medicare for all.
2 years.
And nobody.
What do you imagine the vote count? Just articulate to me.
I'm
what
trying.
Do you imagine the vote count?
I'm trying in this moment to articulate to you what the goal of force the vote was, because it was never about passing Medicare. No, it was not about passing Medicare for all. Because here's the issue, Sam. If your argument is we should only do things if they guarantee a win in this
moment. Not my argument at all.
Okay, well then you can make your argument. But my point is that if that is the way someone saw the world, of course you wouldn't believe in Medicare for all.
That's not.
You wouldn't believe in force the vote, rather. But if you had a longer historical perspective and understood that, for example, when in the lead up to women's suffrage, they did this exact same thing. They forced a vote that failed, but which galvanized a lot more public attention to the need for women's suffrage. And subsequently, about a year later, they were able, because of that upswell of energy and intention, to attend to it. So what you said earlier was that it will make people rise up. And
did that happen in 2017?
No, a little flippant. Well, here, let's take your point about the 2017 vote. So one of the arguments being made by the anti-force the vote crowd is that if we do this, we'll lose political will and it will set back the case for Medicare for all. But by your own admission, they did this in 2017 and subsequently got more co-sponsors for Medicare for all than we've ever had in American history. So the argument that somehow this is going to cost us politically, I think, is really unfounded. Now, I can't prove to you it's going to
make that argument.
But Sam, let me just finish this, since I let you finish as well. I can't promise you any outcome. But in light of how limited the potential costs are, the idea that you wouldn't take this opportunity to withhold the vote to maximize what you can get, whether or not it's a floor vote on Medicare for all, whether it's PAYGO exemptions, whether or not it's getting rid of Richard Neal as the head of the Ways and Means Committee, or any number of the suggestions given by David Sirota, what we saw is that the vote was never held, and instead a bunch of concessions that who knows what the negotiations were like behind the scenes, that ultimately didn't add up to much, or held out as some big get in a way that felt really disingenuous. And I think that that's why so many people on the left find there to be a credibility crisis. It's not that they hate AOC or hate the squad or want to throw anybody away, but they want to hear a better response, an acknowledgement about why it seems like they sold this enormously important progressive issue for so cheap.
Well, first off, I think the conflation between the idea that forcing a losing vote, which I think we can all agree, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything wrong that you disagree with. 325,
yeah.
125.
No one
right.
believes, no
vote in the Senate.
Never that was going
okay.
to.
Okay, let me.
I think we could have got
on the same page with this.
Yeah.
The idea that people are conflating a pursuit of Medicare for all with this particular tactic is wrong. Now, if you want to talk about other things that could have been leveraged, I mean, look.
We were talking about them. We continue to talk about them.
I'm willing to you know, I think you have an argument that maybe it would have been better not to get PAYGO. Maybe it would have been better to get this. But let's play this scenario out. You say there is nothing to lose in this strategy whatsoever. I can tell you that the fact that AOC has led the challenging, I mean, presumably I've heard, and maybe this is wrong, the idea is that the people who vote against Medicare for all, I don't think we have a president who was elected by saying that even if the House and the Senate were to pass Medicare for all, he will veto it. So we have a disagreement as to what we think the public is going to react to at this point and how they will react. Okay? Fine. My sense is that losing vote would not galvanize the population. You would not get people on the streets. You would not get that type of push that you got with suffrage, for instance.
Why not?
Well, so that's the central point then. That's the central disagreement because, as you said earlier, Sam, surely we all agree that under this Congress, that as it's currently constituted, as we know what individual members of Congress are on the record about Medicare for all, they will not pass it. But the idea is that a failing vote and, as Bree is saying, the momentum created by that, the media attention created by that, the starkness of it, would push the matter. I mean, and frankly, I do also want to target this one point that you just made that Biden is a guy who won the Democratic primary, saying I'm Medicare for all, I'm not going to sign that into law, I'm against that. But do you really think that if and again, we're not necessarily going to this point, and this is hypothetical, but that if the Senate with 50 votes passed Medicare for all and the House.
No. I think
with enough votes, he would simply not sign it, or do you not think there's enough momentum at that point that he would say, well, all right, yeah.
I got to think if Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper, and they voted for it, and if the other 125 members of the House who were not going to vote for it voted for it, I would imagine that Joe Biden would sign it. My point is that it did not hurt Joe Biden enough to deny him the Democratic nomination or the presidency. Well, I think in part because of the media, if you want to say, but that's going to be the same media that you're relying on to cover a vote that loses 325 to 120.
How do you get past that, Dan?
Well, I think, frankly, what we need is more power. I have a different sense of than yours as to the power of the left. For instance, okay, now look, I was not one of those people who slammed the people who went out to protest on the Capitol steps about the force to vote. There wasn't many people there. I saw one clip from it where someone is mentioning my name as being part of why this doesn't happen. And I can tell you this, if Sam Seder is the obstacle to getting Medicare for all. You can even say Seder is the obstacle to getting Medicare for all.
I know where he lives.
I am sitting in front of IKEA panels right now.
I know where it is. I was going to drop his address in the chat, and you can go rush that studio right now, and we can get Medicare for all right now.
I mean, I just think that we don't have the power that's there, and I think the danger, what you can lose in trying to use a phone as a hammer is you can break the phone.
Can I just address that? I want to take that good faith version of that argument that you just made. Like, really, truly, I want to drill down on this. This is serious stuff, okay? The argument being made to Sam is not that you individually hold all the power in the world, but that there is, whatever left media structure we have is fairly limited. And both you and the Young Turks are take up an enormous percentage of that left media space.
I think Jimmy has a bigger audience than I do.
Yeah, he does, but that's not the point. You and Young Turks together take up an enormous amount of space. Jimmy has his own platform.
I have no idea what their perspective on this was.
Okay, and then in terms of beyond the left media space, who else has influence in the left media? Well, there's unions and there's the DSA, right? And so if Young Turks takes up, I don't know, probably 80% of the left. I don't know how big they are, but obviously they're the main player. If Young Turks comes out against an idea, if you come out against an idea,